The rain was relentless that afternoon, drumming against the streaky windows of St. Joseph Hospital's cafeteria like it had a personal grudge against Seattle. Inside, the air smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant, a combo that'd make anyone question their life choices. The fluorescent lights flickered every few minutes, casting a sickly glow over the chipped formica tables and the sad little trays of overpriced hospital food. It was the kind of place where you'd expect to find stale bagels and despair, not a life-changing moment. But life's funny that way. It sneaks up on you when you're least expecting it, holding a $3 chicken sandwich that's drier than a desert road trip. Ethan Carter sat alone at a corner table, his lanky frame hunched over a plastic tray. At 32, he was the kind of guy you'd peg as a tech nerd who'd hit the jackpot. Messy dark hair poking out of an old gray hoodie, sharp green eyes dulled by exhaustion, and a jawline that'd probably look better if he remembered to shave. Most people knew him as the founder of Nexlify, the AI company that had taken Silicon Valley by storm and turned him into a billionaire before he could legally rent a car. Forbes had slapped his face on their cover twice, calling him Tech's Golden Boy. But right now he wasn't Golden Boy. He was just Ethan, a guy who'd face-planted on stage during his company's biggest product launch 2 days ago, thanks to a brutal combo of dehydration, sleep deprivation, and too many Red Bulls. The doctors called it severe exhaustion. Ethan called it his body finally telling him to screw off. He poked at the sandwich with a plastic fork, the bread crumbling like it was auditioning for a post-apocalyptic movie. His penthouse back in downtown Seattle, a sleek glass box with a killer view of Puget Sound, felt 1,000,000 miles away. Up there, he had everything. Smart lights that dimmed on command, a fridge that ordered its own groceries, a bed he barely slept in. Down here, in this fluorescent purgatory, he had nothing but time to think about how empty it all was. The skyline glittered every night. But who was he kidding? There was no one to share it with. His assistant scheduled friend hangouts like they were board meetings, and every laugh he got felt like it came with a price tag. Success had built him a castle, but it had locked him in the tower. Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck where the hospital gown's tag still itched. He ditched the gown for his hoodie and jeans, but the sterile smell of antiseptic clung to him like a bad cologne. He'd snuck down to the cafeteria to escape the nurses hovering over him upstairs, their clipboards and pitying smiles making him feel like a lab rat. At least here, he could pretend to be normal for 5 minutes. He took a bite of the sandwich, grimaced, and muttered under his breath, "Tastes like cardboard had a midlife crisis." That's when he heard it, a laugh, bright and unscripted, cutting through the cafeteria's low hum like sunlight breaking through Seattle's endless gray. Ethan's head snapped up, his half-chewed bite forgotten. Across the room near the coffee station, a woman in light blue scrubs was chatting with an elderly guy in a wheelchair. Her curly brown hair was pulled into a high, messy bun, strands escaping like they had a mind of their own. She wasn't tall, maybe 5'5", but she carried herself with this quiet confidence, like she owned the place without even trying. Her skin glowed under the harsh lights, and her eyes, a warm hazel, crinkled at the corners as she laughed again. The old man grinned up at her, shaky hands fumbling with a styrofoam cup, and she steadied it for him with a grace that didn't feel forced. Ethan couldn't look away. There was something about her, something real in a world that had felt fake to him for years. He watched, sandwich dangling in his hand, as she poured the coffee, her voice carrying just enough for him to catch snippets. "Mr. Jenkins, you're gonna owe me a dance if you keep sweet-talking me like that," she teased, and the old guy chuckled, his raspy voice replying, "Only if they start playing Sinatra in this joint." She laughed again, and Ethan felt a grin tugging at his lips without his permission. It wasn't just the sound. It was the way it made the whole room feel less miserable, like she'd flipped a switch he didn't know existed. She turned to leave the coffee station, her white sneakers squeaking faintly on the linoleum, and Ethan realized she was heading his way. His heart did a weird little flip, probably the caffeine withdrawal, he told himself. Up close, she was even more striking. Freckles dusting her nose, a tiny scar above her left eyebrow, and that same energy radiating off her like a quiet storm. She caught his eye as she passed his table, and before he could stop himself, he swallowed hard, nearly choking on the dry sandwich stuck in his throat. Smooth, Ethan. Real smooth. She paused, glancing at his tray, then back at him with a smirk. That sandwich looks like it's begging for a mercy kill, she said, her voice light but laced with a playful edge. Ethan coughed, caught off guard, then let out a laugh. Louder than he'd meant to, the kind that echoed off the walls and made a couple of orderlies glance over. Yeah, it's on life support already, he managed, wiping his mouth with a napkin. Think it's too late to call a code blue? She grinned, her eyes twinkling like she was in on some secret joke. Nah, but I'd start writing its eulogy. I'm Lila, by the way. She stuck out her hand, and Ethan fumbled to shake it, his palm sweaty from gripping the fork too long. Ethan, he said, keeping it simple. No last name, no title, just Ethan. For the first time in years, that felt like enough. Nice to meet you, Ethan who eats sad sandwiches, she said, pulling her hand back and tucking it into her scrubs pocket. You a patient, or just here for the 5-star cuisine? He chuckled, relaxing a little. Patient, I guess. Took a spill a couple days ago. Docs won't let me leave yet. It wasn't the full story. Definitely not the part about collapsing mid-keynote in front of 2,000 people while his company's stock ticker flashed on a giant screen. But it was close enough. Lila nodded, her gaze softening. Rough week, huh? Well, stick around. The coffee's bad, but the company's not terrible. She tapped her fingers on her thigh, a quick, nervous little rhythm, then flashed him another smile before heading off toward the double doors. Ethan watched her go, the sandwich forgotten on his tray, his chest buzzing with something he couldn't name. Hope, maybe? Or just the first real human connection he'd felt since... Hell, he couldn't even remember. He leaned back in the creaky chair, staring at the rain-streaked window. Upstairs, his phone was probably blowing up. Texts from his PR team, his assistant, his CTO Mike, all freaking out about the launch fallout. Down here, none of that mattered. For a few minutes, he'd been just a guy laughing at a bad sandwich with a girl who didn't know his net worth. And damn, if that didn't feel like freedom. Little did he know that flicker of freedom was about to turn his whole world upside down. Sometimes, the smallest moments, like a laugh in a hospital cafeteria, are the ones that rewrite your story. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. This is just the start. Hey, if you've ever found a spark in the most unexpected place, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. What do you think? Will Ethan spill the beans about who he really is? Drop your guess in the comments below. The next few days at St. Joseph Hospital felt like a weird kind of limbo for Ethan Carter. Upstairs, the nurses still poked and prodded him with their thermometers and stern looks, muttering about rest like it was some magic cure he could just flip on. Downstairs, though, the cafeteria had become his escape hatch. The rain kept pounding Seattle, turning the city into a soggy gray blur outside the streaky windows, but inside, the flickering lights and the clatter of trays felt oddly comforting. It wasn't the penthouse with its polished granite counters and voice-activated everything, but it had something better. Lila Hayes. Ethan started timing his trips to the cafeteria like a pro. He'd shuffle down in his beat-up hoodie and jeans, ignoring the doctor's orders to stay in bed, just as the lunch rush thinned out. He told himself it was about dodging the tasteless hospital slop they kept wheeling into his room on squeaky carts. But deep down, he knew it was about her. That laugh of hers, the one that had hooked him like a fish on a line, kept replaying in his head. He'd sit at the same corner table, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee that tasted like burnt regret, and wait. And every day, like clockwork, she'd show up. Lila didn't disappoint. 3 days after their first chat, she slid into the seat across from him, dropping a brown paper bag on the table with a triumphant grin. "Can't let you die on my watch, mystery man," she said, her hazel eyes glinting under the cafeteria's harsh glow. She pulled out 2 sandwiches wrapped in wax paper. Real ones, not the sad excuses the hospital churned out. Turkey and avocado from the deli across the street. Way better than that cardboard you've been choking down. Ethan blinked, caught off guard, then broke into a grin. "You're a saint, like actual Halo and Wings saint." He unwrapped one, the smell of fresh bread and tangy mustard hitting him like a revelation. "I owe you big time." "Damn right you do," she shot back, unwrapping her own sandwich. "But I'll settle for you not passing out on my shift. Deal?" She took a bite, chewing with this casual ease that made Ethan relax in a way he hadn't in years. No rehearsed small talk, no subtle glances at his watch to size up his worth. Just 2 people eating deli sandwiches in a hospital cafeteria. It was the most normal he'd felt since Nexlify's stock ticker started climbing. They fell into an easy rhythm after that. Lunch became their thing. Ethan would save the corner table. Lila would show up with food, sometimes sandwiches, sometimes greasy fries from the food truck parked outside, and they'd talk. About everything and nothing. One day, they got into a heated debate about pizza toppings. "Pineapple's a crime against humanity," Ethan argued, pointing a fry at her like it was evidence. "You can't just slap fruit on a sacred dish and call it a day." Lila laughed, swiping a fry from his pile. "Oh, come on. It's sweet and salty perfection. You're just too stuck up to admit it." She popped the fry in her mouth, smirking. "Live a little, Ethan." "I live plenty," he said, mock-offended. "I just don't ruin pizza doing it." She rolled her eyes, but that crinkle around them told him she was having fun. And so was he. More fun than he'd had in ages. Boardroom battles and investor calls didn't exactly leave room for fry-stealing debates. With Lila, he didn't have to be Ethan Carter, tech billionaire. He was just Ethan, the guy who'd grown up tinkering in his mom's garage in Tacoma, dreaming of building something that mattered. He told her about that once, over a shared bag of chips. How he'd coded his first program at 13 on a clunky old Dell, the screen glowing green in the dark while his mom slept on the couch nearby. "Sounds lonely," Lila said, her voice softening as she crunched a chip. "But kinda cool, too. You were a little nerd back then, huh?" "Big nerd," he corrected, grinning. "Still am, I guess. What about you? Always wanted to be a nurse?" She leaned back, tapping her fingers on the table, a quick, restless rhythm he'd started to notice when she was thinking. "Not always. Grew up in Rainier Valley, tough part of town. Mom worked doubles at the diner to keep us afloat after Dad split. I wanted to be a doctor at first, but nursing felt, I don't know, closer to people. Plus, I've got this dream of opening a free clinic down there someday. Help folks who can't afford the fancy stuff." Ethan's chest tightened a little. Not pity, admiration. "That's badass," he said, meaning it. "You're out here saving the world one patient at a time," she snorted, waving him off. "Hardly, just trying not to screw up too bad." But the way her eyes lit up told him it meant more than she let on. That's when the high point hit, a moment that'd stick with him long after the hospital walls faded from his life. It was a Thursday, the rain finally letting up enough for a sliver of sunlight to sneak through the clouds. Lila grabbed his arm after lunch and tugged him toward the back exit. "Come on, I've got something to show you." Her sneakers squeaked on the wet floor as she led him to the hospital's garden, a scrappy little patch of green tucked behind the building, with soggy wooden benches and a few stubborn daffodils poking through the mud. The air smelled like wet grass and freedom, a sharp contrast to the antiseptic haze inside. "This is my spot," she said, plopping onto a bench and patting the space next to her. "Come here after rough shifts to clear my head. You ever just sit and breathe?" Ethan sat, the bench creaking under his weight. "Not really. Usually too busy coding till my eyes bleed." He glanced at her, half expecting a lecture, but she just pulled a napkin from her pocket and a pen from her bun. Where'd she even hide that? And started doodling. "What if," she muttered, sketching a rough outline of a phone screen, "what if there was an app that tracked patient vitals for us nurses, like real-time updates so we don't have to chase down charts all night?" Ethan stared, his tech nerd brain kicking into gear. "Wait, that's actually brilliant." He grabbed the pen from her, adding a quick flowchart, data sync, alerts, a simple UI. The napkin got soggy fast, ink bleeding into the creases, but they kept going, heads bent close, words tumbling over each other. "You could tie it to wearables," he said, excitement creeping into his voice. "Push notifications when something's off." "And a panic button for emergencies," she added, tapping the napkin. "No more yelling down the hall at 3 a.m. He looked up, catching her eye, and something clicked, deeper than code or sandwiches. "You're kind of brilliant, you know that?" he said, quieter now, like he was afraid to break the moment. She smirked, nudging his shoulder. "And you're not as boring as you look." Her laugh rang out again, echoing off the brick walls, and Ethan felt his heart do that dumb flip again. This wasn't just lunch anymore, this was something. But not everyone saw it that way. Back upstairs, his phone buzzed like a hornet's nest. Texts from Mike Torres, his best friend and Nexlify's CTO. "Dude, where you at? PR's losing their minds over the launch crash. You playing hide-and-seek in a hospital gown?" Mike was a wiry guy with a mop of dark hair and a wardrobe of company logo tees, always talking like he'd mainlined espresso. He'd been with Ethan since the garage days, the only one who could call him out without flinching. Ethan ignored the texts, but the real world was creeping closer. Down in the cafeteria, Lila's coworker Tina Brooks, a blonde nurse with a loud laugh and a knack for gossip, started side-eyeing their little lunch dates. "He's too nice, Lila," she said one day, leaning on the coffee counter with a smirk. "What's his deal? Some rich kid slumming it for kicks?" Lila brushed it off, but the seed was planted. Ethan didn't care. For the first time in forever, he wasn't counting minutes or dollars. He was just a guy with a soggy napkin and a girl who made him want to be more than his bank account. But secrets have a way of unraveling, and this bubble they'd built, it was about to pop. The cafeteria at St. Joseph Hospital had become Ethan Carter's little sanctuary over the past week. The rain outside had slowed to a drizzle, leaving the windows streaked with muddy rivulets that blurred the gray Seattle skyline. Inside, the air still carried that faint whiff of burnt coffee, but now it mixed with the greasy comfort of fries Lila smuggled in, or the occasional tang of mustard from their deli runs. Ethan didn't mind the flickering lights or the sticky tables anymore. This place wasn't just an escape from the sterile hospital room upstairs. It was where he got to be himself, or at least the version of himself he was starting to like again. He'd been dodging the real world like a pro. His phone stayed off, tucked in a drawer next to his hospital bed, where it couldn't buzz with demands from Nexlify's PR team or his assistant's panicked voicemails. Up in his penthouse life, every second was scheduled. Board meetings, investor calls, late-night coding sessions, fueled by energy drinks and stubbornness. Down here, time moved slower. He'd sit with Lila, trading stories over soggy napkins and half-eaten sandwiches, and for once, he wasn't counting the minutes. She didn't know he was the guy behind Nexlify, the AI empire that had plastered his name across tech blogs and stock tickers. To her, he was just Ethan, the dude who'd crashed from overwork and hated pineapple on pizza. And damn, if that didn't feel like a gift. But gifts like that don't last forever. Trouble was brewing, and it started with Mike Torres, Ethan's right-hand man and Nexlify's CTO. Mike had been blowing up Ethan's phone since the launch fiasco. Texts like, "Bro, you alive? Wall Street's freaking out. And PR's spinning this as a wellness break, but you gotta show your face soon." Mike was a live wire, all rapid-fire energy and zero filter, the kind of guy who'd built Nexlify's first server with Ethan in a Tacoma garage over a weekend of cheap beer and bad ideas. He'd always been the realist to Ethan's dreamer, and lately he wasn't thrilled about Ethan's disappearing act. "Dude, you're a billionaire playing hospital hooky," he'd texted last night. "This ain't a rom-com. Get your ass back to HQ." Ethan ignored it, like he'd ignored everything else. He didn't tell Mike about Lila. Not yet. How do you explain that a nurse with a killer laugh and a knack for doodling app ideas on napkins was worth more to you than a billion-dollar company? Mike wouldn't get it. He'd probably laugh, slap Ethan on the back and say, "Good for you, man, but don't tank the stock for a crush." Meanwhile, Lila's world was humming along as usual. She'd breeze into the cafeteria after her shifts, scrubs wrinkled from hours on her feet, that messy bun of hers barely holding together. Ethan loved watching her. How she'd tap her fingers on the table when she got excited. How her voice softened when she talked about her patients. One day, she told him about an old guy she looked after, Mr. Walter, a retired mechanic with a gravelly laugh and a million stories about fixing cars in the 70s. "He's a flirt," she said, grinning over a pile of fries. "Keeps asking me to sneak him a beer, like I'd risk my license for his sorry ass." Ethan chuckled. "Sounds like my kind of guy. You ever cave?" "Nah," she said, stealing a fry from his side. "But I did sneak him an extra pudding cup once. Don't tell the head nurse." She winked, and Ethan's chest did that stupid flip again. He was falling hard, and he knew it. But he also knew the clock was ticking on his little lie by omission. The first crack showed up on a rainy Tuesday. Ethan was back at his corner table, sipping coffee that tasted like regret, when Lila's co-worker Tina Brooks sauntered over. Tina was all sharp edges, bleached blonde hair pulled tight in a ponytail, a loud laugh that carried across the room, and a habit of chewing gum like it owed her money. She'd been eyeballing Ethan and Lila's lunch dates for days, her curiosity practically radiating off her. "Hey, Lila's mystery man," she said, leaning on the table with a smirk. "You're here a lot for a guy who's supposed to be recovering. What's your deal? Tech bro on a sabbatical or something?" Ethan froze, coffee cup halfway to his mouth. Just laying low," he said, forcing a grin. "Docs won't let me leave till I stop looking like death." Tina popped her gum, narrowing her eyes. "Right. Well, you're too nice. Nobody's that nice without an angle." She straightened up, tossing him a look that said, "I'm on to you," then strutted off to the coffee counter. Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Close call. He should have known close calls don't stay close forever. That night, back in his room, Ethan finally turned on his phone. Big mistake. 57 unread texts, 12 missed calls, and a voicemail from Mike that started with, "Dude, I screwed up." Ethan's stomach dropped as he listened. Mike had been out for drinks with his girlfriend, Jess, a chatty barista who loved a good story. He'd let slip that Ethan was hiding out at St. Joseph's after the launch crash, figuring it'd stay between them. Jess, though, had a cousin at TMZ. By midnight, the headline hit. Tech titan Ethan Carter spotted cozying up with mystery nurse. There were grainy photos, Ethan and Lila laughing over fries, her handing him a sandwich, him looking at her like she'd hung the moon. The caption twisted his gut. Billionaire's secret hospital romance. Ethan's phone exploded. PR team, investors, even his mom texting. "Who's this girl, Ethan? Call me." He bolted upright, heart pounding, and yanked on his hoodie. He had to tell Lila before she saw it herself. But he was too late. The next day, the cafeteria was buzzing when he got there. Patients whispering, orderlies sneaking glances at their phones. Ethan slid into his usual spot, palms sweaty, rehearsing what he'd say. "Lila, I should have told you. I'm not just some guy." Then the double doors swung open, and there she was. Lila stormed in, her scrubs clinging to her from the drizzle outside, her face a mix of fury and hurt. In her hand was her phone, screen glowing with that damn TMZ article. She stopped dead in front of him, voice trembling. "Ethan Carter?" she said, her hazel eyes boring into him. "The Ethan Carter? The AI guy? You've been lying to my face this whole time?" Ethan's mouth went dry. "Lila, He stood, knocking his chair back with a screech. "I didn't lie, I didn't tell you everything." "That's the same damn thing," she snapped, loud enough that the room went quiet. Her fingers tapped a frantic rhythm on her phone, her telltale sign of stress. "What was this, huh? Some game? See how long you could play regular Joe with the broke-ass nurse?" "No!" Ethan's voice cracked, desperation spilling out. "Lila, you're the realest thing I've ever had. I just wanted you to see me, not the money, not the company." She cut him off, holding up the phone. "Well, congrats, because now the whole world sees you. And me. My patients are asking if I'm dating the AI guy. My inbox is full of reporters. You happy now?" Her voice broke on that last word, and Ethan felt it like a punch to the chest. She tossed the sandwich she'd brought, a peace offering maybe, onto the table and turned to go. "Lila, wait," he called, but she was already halfway to the doors, her sneakers leaving wet prints on the floor. The sandwich sat there, wax paper crinkling in the silence, a bitter reminder of what he'd just lost. He sank back into the chair, head in his hands, as Tina watched from the coffee counter with a smug, "Told you so" look. Outside, the rain picked up again, hammering the windows like it was mocking him. Upstairs, Nexlify was probably in chaos. Mike texting apologies, PR scrambling to spin the story. Down here, though, Ethan didn't care about any of it. He'd built a bubble with Lila, fragile and perfect, and now it was gone. The question was, could he fix it? Or had he just torched the one thing that mattered? The fallout from TMZ hit Ethan Carter like a tsunami. Up at Nexlify's glassy HQ in downtown Seattle, the chaos was deafening. Phones ringing off the hook, PR team huddled in a war room, and Mike Torres pacing like a caged animal, his sneakers squeaking on the polished floors. "Dude, I'm so sorry." He texted Ethan a dozen times, followed by, "Jess feels awful, man. It was an accident." Accident or not, the damage was done. The stock dipped 3% overnight. Investors were spooked, and the internet was buzzing with memes of Ethan's hospital romance. One genius even photoshopped him in scrubs holding a sandwich with the caption, "Billionaire's bread and butter." Funny, if it didn't feel like his life was imploding. Down at St. Joseph Hospital, though, the real wreckage was quieter, and way more personal. Ethan hadn't seen Lila in 2 days. She'd stopped coming to the cafeteria, her usual corner table empty except for the occasional orderly scarfing down a burger. He'd lingered there anyway, picking at fries that tasted like cardboard without her stealing half, hoping she'd walk through those double doors. She didn't. The nurses upstairs said she'd switched shifts, nights now, probably to avoid him. Ethan couldn't blame her. That look in her eyes when she'd stormed out, the hurt behind her anger, haunted him more than any headline. He was cleared to leave the hospital that week, but he didn't go back to the penthouse. Not yet. The view of Puget Sound felt like a taunt now, glittering and cold, a reminder of everything he'd chased that left him hollow. Instead, He crashed at Mike's cramped apartment in Capitol Hill, sleeping on a lumpy couch that smelled faintly of weed and pizza grease. Mike tried to lighten the mood, tossing him a beer one night. "Look, man, she's pissed, but she'll cool off. Chicks dig grand gestures, right? Write her an app or something." Ethan cracked a weak smile, popping the can. "Not this one. She doesn't care about apps or money. That's the whole damn point." He took a swig, the bitter fizz doing nothing for the ache in his chest. "I screwed up, Mike. She saw me. Really saw me, and I still hid who I was." Mike flopped onto an armchair, running a hand through his messy hair. "Yeah, well, you're Ethan freaking Carter. Hiding's kinda your superpower, but maybe it's time to quit playing Clark Kent, you know?" Ethan didn't answer, just stared at the can in his hand. Mike was right. He'd spent years dodging the spotlight, terrified of being loved for his bank account instead of himself. But with Lila, he'd flipped the script too far, and now she was gone. He had to fix it. Not with money or tech or some slick PR move, with the truth. All of it. All. That's how he ended up in Rainier Valley on a soggy Thursday night, standing outside Lila's house in the pouring rain. It was a modest place, a squat, single-story box with peeling blue paint and a sagging porch, the kind of home that screamed hard work over handouts. The street was quiet, except for the patter of rain on cracked asphalt and the faint hum of a TV inside. Ethan's hoodie was soaked through, water dripping off the brim as he shifted his weight, clutching a soggy deli bag with 2 turkey sandwiches. He'd Googled her address. Yeah, creepy, he knew, but desperation trumped dignity tonight. He took a deep breath, the cold biting his lungs, and knocked. The door creaked open a minute later, revealing a woman who could only be Lila's mom, Mrs. Ruby Hayes was short and sturdy, her graying curls pulled back tight, her dark eyes narrowing at the drenched stranger on her porch. She wore a faded diner apron, the kind with grease stains that told stories, and her voice had a Louisiana drawl that cut through the rain. "Who the hell are you knocking this late? We ain't buying nothing." Ethan swallowed, hands shaking, not from the cold. I'm Ethan. Ethan Carter. I'm here for Lila. Is she—" Ruby's face hardened. "You're that Ethan? The rich boy who turned my girl's life into a circus?" She stepped forward, blocking the doorway like a bouncer. "Reporter's been calling my phone all damn day. My baby's out there working herself ragged, and you're why. Give me one good reason I shouldn't slam this door in your face." Before Ethan could stammer a reply, a younger voice piped up from inside. "Mom, chill! Is that him?" A girl bounced into view, 19 maybe, with Lila's curls but a brighter, TikTok-ready energy. She grinned, shoving past Ruby. "Oh my God, you're the AI guy. I'm Jada, Lila's sister. Dude, you're loaded. Can you Venmo me for college or what?" "Jada, hush," Ruby snapped, but Ethan caught the faintest smirk on her lips. He held up the deli bag like a peace offering. "I just want to talk to her. Please. I brought sandwiches. She likes the turkey ones." Ruby eyed the bag, then him, her glare softening just a fraction. "She ain't here. Night shift. But you better not be wasting my time, boy." She stepped aside, grudgingly letting him in. The living room was small and warm, cluttered with mismatched furniture and the smell of gumbo simmering somewhere. Jada flopped onto a couch, already scrolling her phone, while Ruby crossed her arms, watching Ethan like a hawk. "Lila's mad as hell," Ruby said, voice low. "And I don't trust men like you. Fancy suits, big promises. My ex was one of y'all, left us high and dry. She don't need that mess again." "I'm not him," Ethan said, meeting her gaze. "I messed up, yeah. But I'm not here to play games. I care about her. More than anything." Ruby didn't blink, but something shifted in her eyes. Testing him, maybe. Before she could respond, Jada piped up. Sis said you're cute but a liar. She's at the hospital till midnight. You gonna grovel or what? Ethan nodded, rain dripping onto the rug. Yeah, I'm gonna grovel. He didn't wait till midnight. An hour later, he was back at St. Joseph, standing under the awning outside the ER entrance, the rain hammering down like it was trying to drown him. His sneakers squelched with every step, and the deli bag was a soggy mess, but he didn't care. When Lila's shift ended, she'd have to come this way. He'd rehearsed 100 versions of this, apologies, explanations, but when she finally stepped out, scrubs clinging to her from the wet night, all of it flew out the window. She froze, spotting him, her face a storm of exhaustion and wariness. Ethan, what the hell? I'm terrified, he blurted, cutting her off, his voice raw. I'm terrified of being loved for my bank account, Lila. Every relationship I've had since Nexlify took off, it's been a transaction. People laugh at my jokes before I finish them, ask for favors before they ask my name. Then I met you, and you didn't care about any of it. You saw me, and I was so scared of losing that, I hid the rest. He stepped closer, rain streaking his face. I'm soaked. I'm a mess, and I'm here because I'm more scared of losing you than anything else. Lila's fingers tapped her thigh, fast and frantic, her eyes locked on his. You don't get it, she said, voice trembling. The lie hurt more than the money ever could. My phone's blowing up. Reporters, co-workers. My mom's freaking out. I'm not built for your world, Ethan. Then I'll come to yours, he said, firm despite the shake in his hands. I'll fix this, whatever it takes. Just don't walk away yet. She didn't say yes, didn't say no either. After a long, rain-soaked silence, she sighed, brushing wet curls from her face. I'm too tired to fight you tonight. Meet me tomorrow, Cafeteria. We'll talk. She turned to go, then paused, glancing back. And lose the soggy bag? It's pathetic. Ethan watched her disappear into the night, a flicker of hope sparking in his chest. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a crack in the door, a chance. Back at Nexlify, Mike was probably tearing his hair out, the board demanding answers. Here, though, Ethan had a shot at something real. He just had to figure out how to take it. The drizzle had turned into a full-on downpour by the time Ethan Carter got back to St. Joseph Hospital the next day. The cafeteria smelled the same, burnt coffee and despair. But the vibe was off. The usual hum of chatter was spiked with whispers, heads turning as he walked in. Orderlies scrolled their phones under tables, patients craned their necks, and Ethan caught the tail end of a hushed, "That's him, right? The billionaire?" TMZ had done its damage, and now the bubble he'd built with Lila was a public circus. He slid into their corner table, hoodie dripping, and waited, his stomach knotting tighter with every tick of the clock. Up at Nexlify HQ, things were just as messy. Mike Torres had called an emergency meeting that morning, his voice crackling through Ethan's phone on speaker. "Dude, Pinnacle Ventures pulled out, 10 million bucks, gone," he'd said, panic edging his usual bravado. "They're pissed you're AWOL. Board's talking about a new CEO if you don't show up soon." Ethan had barely grunted a response, too focused on Lila to care about stock dips or boardroom coups. Mike had sighed. "Look, I get it. She's special. But you're tanking us for a chick you met over fries. Snap out of it." Ethan hadn't snapped out of anything. He'd hung up, grabbed a coffee, and headed to the hospital. Nexlify could wait. This couldn't. Lila showed up 20 minutes late, her scrubs wrinkled from a brutal night shift, dark circles under her eyes. She didn't sit, just stood there, arms crossed, her fingers tapping a restless beat on her elbow. "You're here," she said, voice flat. "Guess I shouldn't be surprised." "Said I'd be," Ethan replied, pushing the extra coffee he'd bought toward her. "Lila, Save it," she cut in, sharp enough to make him flinch. I saw the news again this morning. Tech King's nurse girlfriend, gold digger or true love. My coworkers won't stop staring. Tina's been cracking jokes all shift. Guess you're too good for us now, huh? Her voice cracked, and she looked away, jaw tight. I didn't sign up for this, Ethan. He stood, hands out like he could fix it with a gesture. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm trying to shut it down. My team's scrubbing the photos, threatening lawsuits. I didn't want this either. She laughed, bitter and hollow. Oh, you didn't want this? Poor you, stuck with your fancy lawyers and your penthouse pity party. Meanwhile, my mom's got reporters camped outside her house. Jada's freaking out 'cause some blog posted her prom pics, calling her the billionaire's future sister-in-law. This isn't just your mess. It's mine now. Ethan's chest tightened. I'll fix it, Lila. I swear. I'll talk to your mom. Pay for security. Pay? Her eyes flashed, and she stepped closer, voice low and furious. You think throwing money at this makes it go away? That's your problem, Ethan. You think everything's a transaction. I'm not one of your investors you can buy off. That's not what I meant, he shot back, louder than he'd intended. Heads turned, but he didn't care. I'm trying to protect you by... Protect me, she snapped. You lied to me. You sat here eating my fries, doodling on napkins, acting like some regular guy, and the whole time you're this tech god with a private jet. How's that protecting me? I didn't want you to see the jet, he shouted, frustration boiling over. I wanted you to see me, the guy who'd rather code in a garage than sip champagne at galas. You think I like this crap? The fake friends, the gold diggers, the paparazzi? I hid it 'cause with you, I didn't have to be Ethan Carter, billionaire asshole. I could just be Ethan. Lila's face softened for a split second, then hardened again. And I could just be Lila. But now I'm the nurse who bagged a billionaire. You don't get how this changes everything. Before he could answer, her pager beeped, shrill and urgent. She glanced at it, swore under her breath, and turned to go. I've got a patient. We're not done, but I can't do this right now. Lila, wait, he started, but she was already gone, the double doors swinging shut behind her. Ethan sank back into the chair, coffee cold in his hands, the whispers around him buzzing like flies. He'd blown it. Again. Hours later, fate, or dumb luck, threw them back together. Ethan was still at the hospital, wandering the halls like a lost puppy, when an ER nurse grabbed him. You, Ethan. Lila said you're some tech hotshot. We need help. Now. A little girl, maybe 6, had crashed in the ER. Rare heart condition. Equipment delayed in transit. Lila was in there, barking orders, her hands steady despite the chaos. Ethan didn't hesitate. He called Mike, pulling every string Nexlify had to rush a portable monitor from their warehouse to St. Joseph in under an hour. He stood outside the ER, rain-soaked and useless until the machine arrived, beeping and sleek, a lifeline. When Lila emerged, scrubs splattered with sweat, the girl stabilized. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time that day. You did that? She asked, voice hoarse. Yeah, he said, shoving wet hair out of his eyes. Least I could do. She nodded, slow, like she was weighing something. She's gonna make it. Thanks. A beat, then quieter. Doesn't fix us, though. I know, he said, throat tight, but I'm not giving up. She didn't respond, just walked past him toward the garden out back. Ethan followed, the rain hammering down, turning the muddy path into a swamp. She stopped by the bench where they'd sketched that napkin app, weeks ago, a lifetime ago, and spun to face him, her curls plastered to her face. Our worlds don't fit, Ethan, she said, voice breaking.
Your boardrooms and billions. I'm night shifts and student loans. This, she waved a hand between them, it's a fantasy.
Then I'll change my world, he yelled over the storm, stepping closer, water streaming off his hoodie. I'll quit Nexlify, sell the penthouse, whatever it takes. I don't care about the money. I care about you. She stared at him, rain mixing with tears she wouldn't admit to. You don't get it. I don't want you to quit. I want you to be real with me, about all of it. But this? She gestured to the chaos around them, her soaked scrubs, his dripping clothes, the hospital glowing behind them.
It's too much. I can't live like this.
Lila, he started, reaching for her, but she shook her head, stepping back. I need space, she said, firm despite the tremble in her voice. Don't follow me this time. She turned and walked off, disappearing into the rain, leaving Ethan alone in the garden. The bench creaked under him as he sat, soaked to the bone, the weight of her words crushing him. She was right. Their worlds didn't fit. Not yet. But he wasn't ready to let go. Not when she'd just saved a kid with his help. Not when he could still feel the spark of that napkin moment between them. Back streaming down his face. I'll ditch the boardrooms, the penthouse, whatever it takes. I don't care about any of it if it means losing you, Lila. You're not a fantasy. You're the only real thing I've got. Lila's eyes widened, rain blurring the edges of her exhaustion and anger. You don't get it, do you? She shouted back, her voice raw against the storm. You can't just quit being a billionaire like it's a side gig. Your life comes with cameras and headlines and people tearing me apart to see if I'm worthy. I'm a nurse, Ethan. I fix people, not PR disasters. I don't know how to live in your world, and I don't want to. Then why'd you let me in at all? He fired back, desperation cracking his voice. Why'd you bring me sandwiches, laugh at my dumb jokes, sketch apps with me if it was all gonna end like this? You saw something in me. Don't tell me that was fake. It wasn't fake, she yelled, stepping closer, her sneakers sinking into the mud. I saw a guy who cared, who listened, who made me feel like I wasn't just some broke chick scraping by. But that guy's buried under all this. She gestured wildly at nothing and everything. This billionaire bullshit you didn't trust me enough to share. You think I'd care about your money? I cared about you, Ethan, and you still hid half of who you are. Her words hit like a gut punch, stealing the air from his lungs. He stood there, soaked and shivering, the rain drowning out the world until it was just them. Two people screaming at each other in a muddy hospital garden. I hid it 'cause I'm scared, okay? He admitted, voice dropping to a ragged whisper. Scared you'd look at me different. Scared you'd walk away. And now you're doing it anyway. Lila's face crumpled, tears mixing with the rain. I'm not walking away because of the money, she said, softer now, almost lost in the storm. I'm walking away 'cause I don't know who you are anymore. The guy I trusted, he's gone. She turned, her shoulders hunched against the downpour, and started back toward the hospital. Lila, please, Ethan called, lunging after her, his hand grazing her arm. She yanked it free, spinning around one last time, her eyes blazing through the wet. Don't, she said, firm and final. Just don't. I need space, Ethan. Figure out what you want, really want, 'cause I can't do this halfway. She walked off, disappearing into the ER's glow, leaving him alone in the rain, with nothing but the echo of her words and the soggy bench where it all started. Ethan stood there numb, the storm pounding him like it was trying to wash away the last shred of hope. He'd saved a kid's life today, pulled every string he had, and it still wasn't enough. Lila was right. Money couldn't fix this. Tech couldn't fix this. He'd built an empire solving problems with code and cash. But this was a problem he didn't know how to crack. Back at Nexlify the next morning, The air was thick with tension. Ethan dragged himself into the glass-walled conference room, still damp from the night before, his hoodie swapped for a rumpled button-up that didn't hide the bags under his eyes. The board was waiting, 6 suits and ties staring him down like he'd personally tanked their portfolios. Mike hovered by the coffee machine, looking like he hadn't slept either, his usual energy dialed down to a nervous twitch. "Ethan," the chairman started, voice clipped. "Pinnacle's out. Stock's down 5%. We need you focused. Here, not playing house in a hospital. Step up, or we'll find someone who will." Ethan stared at the table, the polished wood reflecting his hollow face. "I'm here," he said, flat. "What do you want?" "We want a CEO, not a tabloid star," another board member snapped. "This nurse thing, it's a distraction. Cut it loose and get back to work." Mike jumped in, hands raised. "Whoa, hold up. Ethan's the heart of this company. You don't just bench him because he's got a life." "He doesn't have a life," the chairman shot back. "He has a responsibility. To us, to the shareholders. Fix this, Carter, or you're out." Ethan didn't argue, didn't fight. He just nodded, the weight of it all crushing him. Back at his desk, he scrolled through the latest headlines. Carter's love life costs Nexlify millions, and felt nothing. Lila's words kept looping in his head. "I don't know who you are anymore." Maybe she was right. Maybe he didn't know either. Down in Rainier Valley, Lila wasn't faring much better. Her shift at St. Joseph had been hell, whispers from co-workers, Tina's snarky, "So, you dumping him yet?" cutting deeper than she'd admit. She'd powered through, hands steady on patience, but inside, she was a wreck. Back home, Ruby was waiting, arms crossed over her diner apron. "You okay, baby?" she asked, voice softer than usual. "No," Lila admitted, sinking onto the couch. "He's a mess, Mom, but so am I. I yelled at him in the rain like some damn soap opera." Ruby sat beside her, rubbing her back. "Men like that, they bring trouble. But he showed up here soaked and sorry. That's something. You sure you're done?" Lila didn't answer, just stared at the TV flickering with Jada's reality shows. Jada poked her head in, grinning. "Sis, he's hot and rich. You're crazy to ditch him." "Jada, shut it," Lila muttered, but a tiny, tired smile slipped out. She wasn't done, not completely, but she couldn't keep bleeding for a guy who didn't know how to be real. Ethan didn't go back to the cafeteria that day, or the next. He threw himself into a Nexlify, 18-hour days of damage control, his old hoodie swapped for suits he hated. The board backed off. Pinnacle reconsidered, but it felt hollow. Every night, he'd crash on Mike's couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying that fight in the rain. Lila's face, hurt, furious, beautiful, wouldn't leave him. He'd lost her, and it was killing him more than any stock drop ever could. The breaking point wasn't the end, though. Not yet. Something was coming. A spark, a chance, a crack in the wall they'd built between them. But right now, in the rain-soaked wreckage of their worlds colliding, it felt like game over. And Ethan didn't know how to restart. When everything crashes, can you rebuild? Hit subscribe to see if Ethan and Lila can claw their way back from this. Ever had a fight that felt like the end? Drop it in the comments. I'm listening. The rain didn't let up in Seattle that spring, and neither did the mess Ethan Carter had made of his life. After that blowout fight in the hospital garden, he'd gone quiet. Too quiet. No more cafeteria stakeouts. No more soggy apologies. He threw himself back into Nexlify, clocking 20-hour days in a glass office that felt more like a cage. The board backed off once Pinnacle Ventures reinvested, the stock steadied, and the headlines faded to a dull roar. Billionaire back on track. But Ethan wasn't on track. He was running on fumes, sleeping at his desk in a hoodie that still smelled faintly of hospital antiseptic, chasing a fix for a problem he couldn't code his way out of. Lila was gone, and no amount of AI breakthroughs could fill the hole she'd left. Lila Hayes wasn't doing much better. She'd doubled down on night shifts at St. Joseph, dodging the cafeteria like it was haunted. The whispers had died down, Tina's snark replaced by bored shrugs, but the sting lingered. She'd buried herself in work, hands steady on patients, voice calm in chaos. But at home, she'd collapse on the couch, staring at nothing while Ruby's gumbo simmered in the background. Jada kept pushing. "Sis, call him! He's miserable without you!" But Lila just shook her head. "He's not my mess to fix," she'd say, though her tapping fingers betrayed the lie. She missed him. The Ethan who'd laughed at her burnt cookies, who'd sketched dreams with her on a soggy napkin. But trust? That was harder to rebuild than a broken bone. The turning point came on a Wednesday, gray and dreary like every other day that month. Ethan was back at St. Joseph, not for Lila but for a checkup, his doc insisting he'd pushed himself too hard again. He was in the hallway, fiddling with a pen his mom had given him years ago, scratched up silver, the only thing he'd kept from the garage days, when he heard a familiar gravelly laugh. Mr. Walter, the old mechanic Lila loved, was rolling by in his wheelchair, a pudding cup balanced precariously in his lap. "Well, if it ain't the tech kid," he rasped, grinning. "Thought you'd vanished." Ethan forced a smile, pocketing the pen. "Hey, Walter, just passing through. How's Lila treating you?" Walter's eyes twinkled, sharp despite his age. "She's a saint, that one. Tough week, though. Kid almost didn't make it last night. She's in the garden, decompressing. You ought to say hi." Ethan hesitated, the memory of their fight flashing like a warning sign. "She doesn't want to see me." Walter snorted, wheeling closer. "Bull. She talks about you. Won't admit it, but I hear things. Been watching you two since day one, kid. Knew who you were the second you sat in that cafeteria. All fidgety and rich. Kept my mouth shut 'cause I figured you'd tell her when you were ready." He leaned in, voice dropping. "I lost a girl once. Lied about something dumb. Thought I was protecting her. Took me 20 years to learn trust beats pride every time. Don't wait that long." Ethan stared, the old man's words sinking in like rain on parched ground. Walter knew? All this time? It hit him hard. Someone had seen through his mask and still rooted for him. Maybe Lila could too, if he stopped hiding. "Thanks, Walter," he said, voice thick. "You're a sneaky bastard, you know that?" "Damn right," Walter chuckled, rolling off with his pudding. "Go get her, hotshot." Ethan found her in the garden, sitting on their bench, scrubs damp from the drizzle. Her curls were loose, clinging to her face, and she didn't look up when he approached. "Lila," he said, soft, like he was testing the air. She tensed, fingers tapping her knee. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" "Check up," he said, then stepped closer, rain pattering on his hoodie. "And you. I came for you." She didn't move, so he kept going, words spilling out. "I've been a wreck without you. Not 'cause of the company or the headlines, 'cause I miss us. The fries, the laughs, that dumb napkin app. I was scared to be real 'cause everyone I've ever let in just saw dollar signs. But you didn't. And I still screwed it up." Lila finally looked up, eyes guarded but listening. "You hurt me, Ethan. Not the money, the lie. I thought we were equals." "We were," he said, kneeling in the mud so they were eye level, rain soaking his jeans. "We are. I'm done hiding. No more half-truths. I'll quit Nexlify if that's what it takes. Give it all up. I just want you." She shook her head, a faint smile breaking through. "Don't quit, you idiot. You love that company. Just be you, all of you. Can you do that?" He nodded, heart pounding. "Yeah, all of me. Messy, nerdy, scared shitless me. And you're my world, Lila." Not the penthouse, not the jet, you. She stared at him, rain streaking her face, then reached out, brushing his wet hair back. "You're still an ass for lying," she said, voice softening. "But I miss you too. Let's try this, for real. No more secrets." Ethan grinned, relief flooding him, and pulled her into a soggy hug. She laughed, that laugh, the one that had started it all, and punched his arm. "You owe me a sandwich, a good one." "Deal," he said, holding her tight as the rain washed the last of the tension away. 2 years later. Tacoma, Washington. The wedding was a beautiful mess. They'd picked a barn just outside Tacoma, close to Ethan's old garage roots, with fairy lights strung up and a mismatched crowd spilling across the lawn. Lila's New Orleans family brought the soul, Ruby ladling gumbo into bowls, Jada leading a second-line dance with cousins whooping and waving napkins. Ethan's Silicon Valley crew showed up awkward and overdressed, fumbling through the cha-cha slide while Mike spun Ruby around, grinning like a fool. The menu was caviar and cornbread, a clash of worlds that somehow worked. Lila wore a white dress that hugged her curves, but halfway through the night, she swapped it for scrubs, rushing off when a patient went into labor at St. Joseph. Ethan just laughed, kissing her goodbye. That's my girl. They'd built something real in those 2 years. Ethan stepped back as CEO, handing the reins to Mike but staying on to innovate. Less suits, more hoodies. Lila kept her shifts, now head of emergency nursing, and together they launched HealthSync, a foundation blending his tech with her heart to bring healthcare to Rainier Valley's poorest corners. The media still sniffed around. Tech Titan ties the knot. But they didn't care. Home was a cozy house near the hospital, not the penthouse Ethan sold off, where Lila forced him to watch Real Housewives while he tried explaining blockchain over burnt cookies she still baked. Last week they'd hit the cafeteria again, Ethan with a sad sandwich, Lila in scrubs, smirking, "Still needs a mercy kill." A kid, a med student interning at St. Joseph, stopped them, wide-eyed. "You're the HealthSync guys, right? Your story got me into this, tech and medicine together. It's dope." Ethan handed him that scratched-up pen. Lila tossed him a cookie. "Don't fear being real, kid," she said. And they walked off, her hand in his, laughing like it was day one. Love, they'd learned, wasn't about matching bank accounts or worlds. It was about matching souls, stripped down, messy, true. Ethan had lost everything he thought he wanted to find what he needed, and Lila had shown him how. Sometimes it starts with a bad sandwich and a laugh in the rain. Sometimes that's enough. If this hit your heart, smash subscribe for more real stories like Ethan and Lila's. Drop a love in the comments if you believe in destiny. I want to see it.